Hello members, back again to my YouTube channel with me still Rajkara Robert. Today I've come with something very special. There's a serious term here. It looks complicated but they're just simple. This is still the remaining part of information sources. There's what we call pros and cons of information sources. Maybe still your first time to hear about these terms, but they're just simple. They're day-to-day terms you always use, but these are other terms to mean the same thing. Actually, pros and cons, these are the merits and the demerits. In other words, we can talk of these pros is just advantage, and the cons, the disadvantages of information sources. With this slide, we are going to talk about them one by one. We are going to start with the pros of information sources, and by this we have gathered them into a separate column, and we are starting with the primary source and the secondary source. Actually, if we are to look at this one, I may not be explaining deep into detail because these points are just direct or they are just obvious. When we talk of the pros or the advantages of the primary sources, later on I told you that primary sources, these are first-hand information actually gathered by that person in the who is experiencing the occurrence right at that time. If we talk of the pros or the advantages of primary sources, the first one we are saying they provide direct access to first-hand account. This is just obvious. The direct access, you'll be like actually the information. In other words, they're saying the information are still tangible. You can still see, you can still feel, you can still touch. That's the meaning. They provide direct access to first-hand account. Then the second point to note about the pros of this primary source is what we call they provide raw data. These are just simple. These are the data which is not yet processed. That's what we call raw data. So with the primary sources, the information is not all that interpreted as for the case of secondary sources. They are still like very raw like that one. Then the last one, they are saying primary sources facilitates raw insight and original analysis. Actually, you can still recharge that raw data there and then at that occurrence. So that's all about the pros of primary sources. Still again, if we proceed to the secondary sources, the first one is they offer comprehensive understanding. What do we mean by comprehensive understanding? Later on, I told you that secondary sources deals with analyzing, summarizing what we call primary sources. Then this your comprehensive understanding. This comes after when you have actually analyzed or interpreted that what we call primary sources. This one will be in form of books or writing. Can be used for future research. This is very helpful. Then what we call it helps to connect the dots between the primary and the secondary sources. Actually, this deals with harmonizing the information. Can be mediated. The way they can do the harmony, it depends, but just deals with harmonizing the information. Actually, that information is what we call primary sources here. That's why they are saying helps to connect the dots between primary and secondary sources. Actually, then the last one about the pros is easier to access and understand. Easy to access and understand secondary sources for primary sources. This for the case if the secondary sources have been mediated, you can go and download the articles, but with the primary sources, very active. So that's briefly about the pros of information sources. Then we proceed to what we call the cons. I told you that the cons is just the disadvantage of something. Then we are starting with the primary sources. The cons, the first disadvantage or the merits is they may be incomplete with primary sources. Maybe we have there is no accountability for that. We cannot record each and every action that took place. That's why they are saying they may be incomplete. Then difficult to analyze without original copy. Analyzing primary sources, yeah, is also hectic unless it has been transformed in secondary sources. Then these primary sources are still actually unpublished because they still requires interpretation. Then if we talk of secondary sources, the bad part of it also, these sources can still be misinterpreted. Why? During time of publishing, there's still other articles which may be missing according to the first-hand information to so-called primary sources. Then there is lack of immediate information. With the secondary sources, takes time to actually be released out. It may take like a 1 full month after primary sources has occurred. So just briefly about the information sources. I hope we are well acquainted with this subtopic of information sources. As you still continue to watch, give comment during the comment section, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Me still remain Rajkar Robert, a student of Gulu University. Thank you. May God bless you all.